It's Monday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Adam Bittner on talking with us about the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to do some rankings. Where do they rank position-wise in their division, in the AFC North, that is, across the board? We'll do some comparing there. We also talk baseball with Noah Hiles. It's going to be a fun Monday episode here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Adam Bittner. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily podcast content that we have from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers. And we bring in Adam Bittner, who's one of the guys that keeps everything flowing here at the Post-Gazette. You may not see him on the articles all the time, but he keeps us all the way running. You see him on the podcast channel all the time because he's always here for breaking news, talking with Paul Zeitz, dealing with that man and his craziness. But he is Adam Bittner. Adam, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey, Chris. Good to see you. Just a reminder, everyone, too, I do the Steelers post-game show, which we're going to be doing before too long here, Chris. It's not going to be too many more weeks.
Adam, I'm trying to enjoy my not busy season as much as I can. So why are you reminding me that there's only a few weeks before training camp?
Just subscribe, and then when things start, everyone will be ready to go.
Absolutely. Adam, I want to talk to you about some position rankings the Steelers have in the AFC North, and we're gonna do offense first, then defense. But you know, there's a lot of talk about the gauntlet that the Steelers are going to go through in the second half of the season, when after the bye week they're going to play all 8 of their AFC North division games, 6 division games in the second half of the season with the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Browns. And so I thought it could be worthwhile to go down the board and compare where they are in comparison, position by position group in those positions. So I wanted to lead off with, of course, the position that's most talked about, the quarterback position, and where you see they are there. Give me your rankings in the AFC North. Which teams are, because I think there's an obvious 1 and a 2, but it's interesting to see who's the 1 and who's the 2, and then where you have the Steelers with a completely new quarterback room. It's completely blown up from the past several years. Where do you have the Steelers ranking there, and who is your top team in the AFC North quarterback-wise?
I think I'm going to go Bengals. I think I like Joe Burrow's whole package a little bit better than Lamar Jackson. That doesn't mean that when Lamar Jackson is at his best that he's not unstoppable and throws a whole different dynamic than anyone else in the division does. I just like the drop back passer, I think, a little bit more. And that's not to say that I like Lamar Jackson better than a lot of other quarterbacks that are drop back passers, but I think Joe Burrow is one of the best. So I think I'd go with Joe Burrow there. And then I think Lamar Jackson too, obviously. Paul Zeitz and I debate 3 and 4 on our show too. I think a lot of people nationally look at the Steelers and say they're number 4, but I don't really buy the Deshaun Watson in Cleveland quite yet. I think we've seen him have games that reminded you of the Deshaun Watson from Houston, but we have not seen him string things together consistently in a really long time. I think we've seen Russell Wilson string things together consistently more recently than we've seen it from Deshaun Watson. So I'm inclined to lean Steelers 3. I think if you made the right argument, I could see Deshaun Watson at 3. But for now, and I'll throw the Steelers depth in there too, because you also have Justin Fields has some experience. I like the Steelers' depth at the position overall. So I think I'm going to go Steelers at 3.
I'm actually with you there. The big thing I have against Deshaun Watson is that he throws too many interceptions. He only had a 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions ratio when he didn't finish the season and missed 6 games, or only played 6 games, excuse me. And to me, that's the biggest thing about the Browns, is that I need to see more from Deshaun Watson. And last year was supposed to be the year where, like, okay, now that he's gotten through his suspension and everything's back and fine, he should be good now. And it's funny, but I said this before. I was saying this leading into the second Browns game. I was like, I think it actually hurts the Steelers that he's gone, because his turnovers were what gave the Steelers the chance to win the first time that they played last year. So I'm with you on that. I think Russell Wilson just has a better career right now than Deshaun Watson, and he's played better. I think last year he was a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson, so I'd say that. But the interesting part is the Lamar Burrow conversation, and you're right. Like, it kind of just depends on what your preference is. Joe Burrow, I think he is one of the best drop back passers in the NFL, and he's in that conversation for MVP whenever he's healthy. But my big thing is, can Joe Burrow be healthy? I think that's the question that I've had for him, because this is now a guy who, in the 4 seasons that he's been in the NFL, he's missed half of the season twice because of injuries, and maybe that's more indicative of his offensive line. But that's where I say I have my hold up with saying I kind of put Lamar Jackson ahead of him, simply because Lamar Jackson plays and he's won 2 MVPs, whereas Joe Burrow, I worry about his health in the long term there. Let's move to running back, because I realize we're trying to cover all these positions, but let's move to running back here. The Ravens added Derrick Henry, and with Nick Chubb coming off an injury, where do you see the AFC North as far as their running back rankings? And the Steelers are kind of unique, because I think everyone can kind of agree, like, Najee Harris isn't better than Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry, but the 1-2 punch of Harris and Warren could change the conversation.
Right. And how much is Derrick Henry riding on, his reputation at this point? He's getting older for a running back, and the Steelers have kind of that youth on their side, even though Najee Harris has been around for a minute. Jaylen Warren as well. I think those 2 guys clearly have their best still in the tank. I think there's a fair question of Derrick Henry. Is he still at his elite form? I think he can still be a really good running back. Maybe he's better than both Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, individually, but as a group, and the way that the Steelers can kind of change speeds with those 2 guys, I still love their group, and that's no disrespect to Derrick Henry. It's just a matter of I like the way they've built things, and Jaylen Warren was a great find as an undrafted free agent.
I feel you on that. So where would you rank the Steelers running backs?
I think I'd rank them number 1.
Okay.
I think if Nick Chubb was still around, I think it might be a different conversation, because I look at him too, and I said before that injury, he was a guy that was definitely in his prime and was definitely at his peak of efficiency. But in his absence, even though I think that Browns running game will still be solid, maybe it's a different conversation by the time we get to October. But just heading into the season with what I know, I think I'd go Steelers 1.
Wow. Okay, Adam. I see what the Steelers are at 1. I struggle with Derrick Henry, because I feel like he could be an awesome addition to what the Ravens do. And if he is still even 80% of what he was in Tennessee, that's a problem. But I feel you there. I think as a group, I like the Steelers better than any other team at running back in the AFC. Let's switch to wide receiver. And this is where I also think the Steelers, I think this might be the position group that takes the biggest hit here. Because I think we can all agree the Bengals, they're probably number 1 with, T. Higgins returning. Jamar Chase is still there. The Browns still got Amari Cooper. But George Pickens and the guys that are fighting to be the number 2 wide receiver for the Steelers right now versus Zay Flowers and the Ravens receivers that are fighting to be the number 2. I think that's an interesting debate there. I think I would take Pickens over Flowers, but comparing necessarily Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson to Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar and those guys, I think I would give the Steelers the edge against the Ravens. Do you agree there, or do you see something else happening there in Baltimore?
Yeah, I think I'd actually go the other way and put the Steelers at 4.
Okay.
Just because, they got a little bit more, proven veteran commodities, that you mentioned. Rashad Bateman, he's always that guy that's on the periphery of the fantasy football waiver wire, right? But he's
right.
He still finds a way to put up decent numbers in the end. He's been around for a while, and that's not to say. Listen, I know Van Jefferson's a veteran. I know some of these guys the Steelers have brought in have been around for a while, but you really haven't. Seen them kind of even touch possible number 2 status, I feel, in the NFL. So Roman Wilson, I feel really good about. I think he could be a person that changes the conversation quickly, or at least by the end of 2024. But going into the season, I think it's kind of like the quarterback conversation where I just lean a little. I think the Steelers are a little less deep than the Ravens, and that's why I would maybe knock them down compared to where I put them ahead of the Ravens, or excuse me, where I put them ahead of the Browns in that earlier conversation. So yeah, I don't love their group. Paul Zeiss and I talk about it all the time. It would one more solid dude in there, I think would have changed a lot of opinions, including mine.
I hear you there. Let's switch quickly to tight ends before we do offensive line and throw to break. Tight ends, I think it's interesting that the Bengals added Mike Gesicki and the potential that he can have there. We've seen the Browns work with David Njoku. We also saw the Ravens. We know about Mark Andrews and what he can do there, but we also saw Isaiah Likely step up for them as a number 2 option. But I look at the Steelers here. I think Pat Freiermuth can be as good as anybody on this list. I think that he's kind of had to work with less than stellar quarterback play compared to a lot of these other tight ends we're naming. But I really like the depth the Steelers have when it comes to tight end, with Darnell Washington being a 2, and even Connor Heyward and Michael Pruitt, as 3rd and 4th options there. I think I want to rank the Steelers as number 2 behind the Ravens, simply because I think Njoku can be really nasty, but I think that Darnell Washington as a blocker, and even what he might be able to do this year as a kind of just even a go up and get it in the end zone type of guy, I think that would put them ahead as a group ahead of other teams other than the Ravens, because again, the 1-2 punch of Andrews and Likely is just really impressive for me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Steelers 3. I can definitely see the argument with the Steelers being higher, but I like David Njoku. I think he's shown more proven ability to kind of take over a game. We saw Pat Freiermuth do it against last season, but David Njoku can kind of just go off, I think, more frequently, and I think that kind of breaks the tie for me. And I think it's really interesting, even the debate between the Steelers and the Bengals, because you have 2 Penn State guys who were kind of the same prototype, right? Kind of split into the same James Franklin offense. Came out around the same time, very similar skill sets. Pat Freiermuth was I think a little more sure-handed than Mike Gesicki was in college, but Mike Gesicki was a lot more explosive than Pat Freiermuth. So I think the question is which team could unlock those guys with similar skill sets better this season.
I hear you there. Now let's go to offensive line, and to me, this is a very interesting group to rank in the AFC North, because we don't know exactly who's going to start for the Steelers yet on the offensive line. They drafted Zach Frazier, they drafted Troy Fautanu, but they still have Dan Moore Jr. on the roster. But even so, even with Mason Cole playing as poorly as he did last year, and Dan Moore Jr. Still being in there, if it's just Zach Frazier as a rookie coming in at center, and let's say Troy Fautanu spends this year behind Dan Moore Jr. in the second half of the season, when Broderick Jones became the starter on the Steelers offensive line, they had the number 2 rushing offense in the final 10 weeks of the season, and to me, that was a big indication of how good Broderick Jones was and what he added to the Steelers' offensive line. Now, I still say the Browns have the best offensive line. Bitonio, Pochich, Teller, Conklin, Jedrick Wills, and you still have DeJuan Jones as a bench player. I think that is the best offensive line in the AFC North, and is up there in the league, I think. But I look at the Bengals. They added Orlando Brown Jr., but I don't have much confidence in the other guys around him. I'd still be very concerned about Joe Burrow's protection this year. And I think the Ravens, they have pieces that I like. I really like Linderbaum. I really like Ronnie Stanley, but they have a lot of question marks for me too. I would actually put the Steelers offensive line at second here, and that's even with the question marks we have, and we don't know the rookies, but Daniels, Sayamalu, and Jones, I think those 3 as a punch can be really good. And if Frazier and or Fautanu work out to be really good in their rookie years, this could be one of the better offensive lines in football.
Yeah, could be. I think I would put them 3rd, just because I think the Ravens have more of an identity than the Steelers do at this point, and it's easier for them to plug offensive linemen in. They know what the program is. They know what their job is. They know what they're being asked, and I think kind of regardless, I think I like the Ravens better for that reason. Steelers, my big hesitance is, could be, but will they be? And I think we've seen a lot of, statistically, I know you don't love the PFF stats, but, across the league, PFF, does not typically love, rookies a lot. And I think we saw that in Broderick Jones' overall numbers. He got better as the season went along, but if you look at his overall PFF grade from last season, it was just kind of And that doesn't mean I don't think Broderick Jones is and can't be a really good player and continue to grow. I just think the immediate impact of those offensive linemen, makes it. I don't know that they're going to be Pro Bowlers off the jump, even if they can be overall. So I have to see it from the Steelers offensive line this season, even though I feel good about their long term. I think it's the same thing about the Ravens. I'll believe they're going to protect Joe Burrow when I see it.
I hear you there. We got to take a break. We come back. We'll rank defensive players in the AFC North and where the Steelers rank at those spots. But first, we'll remind you, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they're on the North Shore, right across the street from PNC Park. It's an amazing place you could go to before, during, after Pirates games, or even just on a regular weeknight, just going to hang out and looking for a good time out in Pittsburgh. Mike's Beer Bar has over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap, and you can get them at any point in time. And they're always switching new ones in and out, so you're always getting a new experience when you go. Their menu is also constantly changing. On top of the steak on a stone, which, by the way, is amazing. You get your own choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. You cut a piece off, you press it into the stone, you choose how well done you got every single bite. Their menu is always changing to having new wraps, new sandwiches, new options every time you go there. I go there all the time. So I'm telling you right now, as a person who experiences Mike's Beer Bar all the time, including this past weekend when I went to see the Pirates, it's the best place in all of Pittsburgh to go to check it out. So go to Mike's Beer Bar today. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Adam Bittner, breaking down the AFC North and where we rank things. All right, let's get to the defensive side of things. And this, we're going to lead with the defensive line. And I want to include the caveat that the defensive line and the linebackers are different for the teams in the AFC North, because where the Browns have Myles Garrett, he is a defensive end, so he is a defensive lineman. TJ Watt is a linebacker for the Steelers, so we'd have to kind of consider him with the linebackers in that group. So, like, when we compare these groups, I want people to remind themselves this is Myles Garrett and all of the Browns defensive front versus Cam Heyward, Larry Ogunjobi, and that crew, whereas TJ Watt will be included in the linebackers segment that we get to there. So let's start with defensive line. And Adam, I feel like the Browns have claim to the top defensive line in the division because of Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, and even Dalvin Tomlinson is a pretty cool addition there too. But I do think the Steelers can say they're right behind them, even without TJ Watt included in that group, because I still think Cam Heyward can be pretty good. I think Keeanu Benton played very well. I think that Larry Ogunjobi's solid enough. And I think the other thing is that the Bengals defensive line doesn't really, I mean, Trey Hendrickson's a good player, sure, but I think that they have questions in the interior that they didn't answer. And the Ravens defensive line, they kept Madubuike, but I got questions at other positions there. I think the Steelers still have a potential to have the second best defensive line in the AFC North. What say you?
I think I would put them number 2 easily at the moment, but I think it's with a couple, big caveats. Number 1 is obviously Cam Heyward. Are you going to be able to continue to perform at a high level at his increasingly advanced age? He's kind of a wonder in the NFL to have made it this far as kind of being the central player on the defensive line. So, can he keep doing that? I think he can. I think he's got at least one more good year in him if he can stay healthy. So that's why I put them number 2. I also say Keeanu Benton. The question is, what is the leap from year 1 to year 2 going to be? If it's really good, I think they could maybe challenge the Browns, for that second spot. But if he doesn't take a big step, then maybe you could see, one of the other teams in the division challenging the Steelers at that spot.
Now, linebacker is where it's also interesting because, again, we're talking about different systems as far as what qualifies as a linebacker. I think the Steelers have the best linebacker group in the NFL, particularly because you throw TJ Watt in there and Alex Highsmith in there. But the thing is that you throw in the Ravens, you got Roquan Smith. He's up there as one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL right now, maybe the best off-ball linebacker. But a guy who was right in that conversation in the top 5 was Patrick Queen, who's now a Pittsburgh Steeler. And to me, that's why the Steelers, hands down, have the best linebacker group, because they got Patrick Queen and TJ Watt out and Alex Highsmith. And I like Landon Roberts as another option with them. And I even like the rookie Peyton Wilson in the mix there. So I have the Steelers with the best linebackers, with the Ravens close behind, the Bengals and the Browns. But do you see it that way, or do you think Roquan Smith is that much better?
No, I think the Steelers, just in total number of players, because remember, the Steelers have 4 linebackers on the field, and they still have depth, right? And I think that's the important component is you can go 5-6 deep between those two position groups. And obviously the two position group, middle and outside, play very differently in the Steelers defense. So it's probably not super fair, but I think you have 5 to 6 solid players. And finally you've gotten to, I think, where the Steelers wanted to be when they had Ryan Shazier around, when he went down with his injury. So I think it's the Steelers number one with a bullet. Even if you take TJ Watt out of the group, I take them.
Ooh, there's a hot take there, Adam. I appreciate going there. Okay, let's go to corners. Corners is interesting because I think a lot of people really like Joey Porter Jr., but not being sure about where Dante Jackson is in fitting into this equation, not being sure where Cam Sutton fits in this equation as well, because of, he didn't play too great in Detroit. Now he's coming back to Pittsburgh. But I look around this division, and I think the Browns still have, I think that's my top cornerbacks unit with Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. I think that they're a really tough 1-2 punch there. But I don't really believe in the Bengals. I mean, Mike Hilton's still your slot, but DJ Turner, Cam Brett, Taylor Britt, I think the Ravens, they're an interesting group because for years Marlon Humphrey has been that guy, but lately he hasn't been as much of that guy. And there's some talk of him not even maybe being with the Ravens for much longer. So I kind of float between the Steelers at 2 and 3. Between them, it's between them and the Ravens. I think the Bengals are last. I think for now, I'll keep the Ravens ahead because of the longevity of Marlon Humphrey, and we just don't know behind Joey Porter Jr. But do you think Joey Porter has put the Steelers at the position to say they have the second best corners in the division right now?
Yeah, statistically, I love what he's doing, and what I'm about to say next, he may have already proven for some people, which is can he be the guy, and can he maybe take that same step we're talking about with Keeanu Benton, from a promising rookie season to this guy's really good in year 2, and if he does, then I think I would agree with you, or maybe I disagree with you that I'd like the Steelers a little bit more at cornerback, but if he is more of the player that we saw last season and doesn't take that next step, I think I would put them at 3 as well. I also, it's like you said, do I trust Dante Jackson? I know the numbers do not love him at all. Right. Maybe the Steelers can find a different way to use him and seize on his talents a little bit better than they did in Carolina, which, I mean, is Carolina, so you don't want to hold that against him too much. And then Cam Sutton, what kind of player is he after this whole experience? Yeah. I know a lot of people in Detroit didn't even love him before the whole situation unfolded. Can he find his niche again in this group? Lots of question marks there. So I think maybe starting at 3 is probably a good starting point.
I think so too, and I think they can quickly rise because I do think Joey Porter Jr. has the potential to be the best corner in the AFC North and one of the best in the NFL with the way that we saw him play last year. But again, it's about what steps does he take forward this year. Last group, the safeties. We talked about how linebackers are their number one in the division. I think they're number one at safety too. And I think because Minkah Fitzpatrick, even though he didn't get any interceptions last year, we've talked to Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator. We've talked to a lot of players. A big emphasis for this year is to let Minkah Fitzpatrick get back to being Minkah Fitzpatrick, because last year he had to play in the slot so much. He had to play dime linebacker so much. He had to come up and help in the box so much. This year, because they've added Patrick Queen, because they've added all the pieces they've had at cornerback, and because they got Deshaun Elliott, who also factors in here, not just in the factor that Deshaun Elliott is a better strong safety than I think they've had in quite some time, but also because now that he's in that role, that's a role that Minkah Fitzpatrick had to do that now he doesn't, and now he can get back to being 6 interceptions a year, first team all pro type of Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think when you look across the division, I think I really like Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams as a 1-2 punch for the Ravens. I think the Bengals, they got some work to do at safety. And I think that there's some potential there with the Browns with Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill. But I think as far as established, really good players, Fitzpatrick and Elliott, and even KZ is a third safety option, that's the best situation in the division right now.
Yeah, I know they feel really good about Deshaun Elliott. I think that's flown under a lot of people's, radars, maybe within the fan base, maybe within some of the media, but a lot of the comments are very positive about him. So I agree with you, Chris. I'd put them number 1. The only caveat I'd give is there are no excuses for Minkah Fitzpatrick anymore.
I agree. Right? You got to get it done this year.
So the question is he still that player for me? And I have, some level of faith that in that center field role, he can be disruptive. But it's been 5 years. It was before the pandemic that we really saw him be that guy, Chris. Mm-hmm. Time flies. And I wonder, if he only lost half a step, how different, does that make him, this far after that huge introduction he had here in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, if he can get back to what he did in 2022 with 6 interceptions, I think he's going to be. I think he gets back into that space of being the best safety in football. But right now, it's a question because he didn't produce last year. And again, it's all about proving it. It's a what have you done for me lately league, and that's certainly going to be the question there. But I think I'm with you. Just right now where they're at, the Steelers have the best safeties, but again, they got to prove it this year with all the additions that they've made. He's Adam Bittner here with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. When we come back, we're going to switch to Pirates with Noah Hiles. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss as we get closer to the All-Star break and closer to answering the question, who do the Pirates trade for if they trade for anybody? Are they buyers or sellers? More on that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We switched to the Pittsburgh Pirates, where we have one of our great Pittsburgh Pirate beat reporters, Noah Hiles, has been on the scene. And Noah, I want to talk to you about where the Pirates are. We'll get into specifically some of the games they've been playing. Mitch Keller does take them out 12:35 Monday to try to end the series against the Mets. They're down 1-2 in that series, but they've had some injuries pile up on them now, including Bailey Falter over this weekend. Could you update everyone as far as where the Pirates are with the people that they have on the 15-day DL and how that's going to impact their plans moving forward?
Yeah, so Falter moved to the IL. I believe it was left triceps inflammation, not information. So he's going to be down for a little bit. Left triceps tendonitis, I should say, not inflammation. So with Falter down and then Jones down, I mean, you're looking at two guys who I don't think we'll see until at least August. Jones, I would expect to be early August, his return. He's not going to throw for 2 weeks. You add in the All-Star break to that equation, and I just think his timetable is late July, early August, and Cherington even said so. Falter is a little different. I think that this is going to be an injury where he might miss a little bit more time. And you look, I mean, Falter, for all the innings limit talk we've had with Skeens and Jones, Bailey Falter's already eclipsed his MLB high in innings. His career high coming into this year was 84 innings. He's thrown 90 and a third already. So I look at Falter as a guy that when he comes back, I'm not sure if he's a starter anymore. And that's not to say that he's played poorly to lose his job. He's been a really good player for this team. It's more just the fact that he has a throwing arm injury after already eclipsing his career high in innings. And a very small in a short window in the first half of a season, you probably need to take it a little easier with him. But the good thing with that is, Chris, is they have depth to kind of ride this stuff out. You look, I mean, Luis Ortiz has been really good this year.
Yes.
And that's his second start. I mean, he threw 6 shutout innings against the Mets, a team that was the best team in baseball last month. His start prior in Cincinnati was really good. I think that Luis Ortiz he deserves a spot in the starting rotation moving forward. Until he performs poorly to lose it, I mean, I don't see why you would put Quinn Priester ahead of him, or somebody else of that status. He's been one of their better pitchers this year, bullpen or starter. So you get him to fill in there and hold on to one of those spots. And then you look at other guys that are coming back. I mean, Priester, I wouldn't be shocked to see Priester start this next series in Milwaukee. He'll probably just take Jones' spot. And then you're going to get Marco Gonzalez back here soon. I think Marco's probably a guy you get back right after the All-Star break, maybe a little bit later. But you have my point in bringing all these names up is you have dudes who can weather this storm for you. For as long as Jared Jones and Bailey Falter need, you have guys who can kind of fill in. So it's not the end of the world. Whereas if you lost a certain player at a different position group, it would be the end of the world with this team. So I mean, you still got Mitch and Skeens as your 1-2. That's about as good as a 1-2 punch in baseball right now. And then after that, with Ortiz, Perez, and then either Gonzalez or Priester, or maybe both of them, you're sitting pretty still.
I hear you on that. I think the thing is that people are still concerned what the Pirates are going to try to do with this team right now. There's still a lot of excitement. You know, we saw each other at the baseball game this weekend, and I think it was Saturday. And when we were there, and I was just like, wow, this place is packed. Now, granted, them luau shirts do help people get to the ball club, but people are excited about this team. Like, you know, like there's I mean, the 14 run game that they had on Friday, you know, just schemes pitching in general. Like there's excitement to this roster. There's still hope for it, but I think that everyone's worried. Does this wane? Does this fall off because they aren't making progress? You know, we talked about this 10-game stretch with the Cardinals, the Mets, the Brewers, and in the first 6 games of the 10 of those 10, they're 2-4. So, you know, there's people that are wondering where they are. And you wrote about, you know, Ben Cherington recently saying there's been no real movement in the trade market. Do you think that this makes it a lot less likely that the Pirates are going to go get people to help this roster maybe find a way into the playoffs? Or do you think that this is still kind of just, we don't know what's going to happen?
I think if things continue the way they are trending right now, I think they're going to make moves that are better for the 2025 team, which means I think they're going to sell off some assets. Now, granted, you don't have a ton of assets to sell on this team. So the assets that I'd look at would be Aroldis Chapman would make the most sense. Because, I mean, and even including what we saw from the guy yesterday, you know, we've seen the bad of him. We've also seen the good. And this is a 7-time All-Star. Yeah. Has the most strikeouts out of any left-handed reliever ever. Probably a Hall of Famer. And he's been on 2 World Series teams. He was the closer for the World Series champion last year. So there's value to be had there. And you can flip him. And, I mean, with Baraki coming back from the IL here soon, you get another left-handed reliever in the bullpen. I don't know if that's going to be a huge loss regardless. I mean, it's just a huge loss in the sense where that was your biggest investment in the offseason. He was only here for 4 months. And then, you know, you could flip Martin Perez. You could flip Marco Gonzalez. Okay. I would assume Perez would be the guy that would go first out of those two because A, left-handed, B, has experience pitching in the bullpen and as a starter, and C, playoff experience. He was on the Rangers last year as well. So those are 2 guys I look at. Maybe you offload Michael A. Taylor in a similar deal that we saw Austin Hedges last year, where it's just the team looking for defensive help off the bench. There's value there with him for that. And then you give Yasmani Grandal to whoever will take him. And Rowdy Tellez is another guy that I could potentially see being dealt just because of how well he's played in the last 5-6 weeks. Right. But, I mean, of all those guys I named, I mean, it's not like that's a substantial loss. I mean, there's some good players in there. Don't get me wrong. Like, Taylor plays good defense. Tellez has been probably their 2nd to 3rd best hitter over the last couple of months. And Chapman has been there, you know, he's been Chapman for good and for better or for worse. But those moves clear up money to, you know, potentially, you know, you never know, but clear up money for them to start preparing their financial resources for the offseason. And they could bring back some prospects. And they clear up opportunities for other guys, younger guys. With no Michael A. Taylor, it should be Palacios and Jack Sawinski playing in center field. And those are your outfielders for the future. With no Aroldis Chapman, that's more opportunities in late innings for a guy like Kyle Nicholas, who's showed pretty good potential in these last couple of months that he maybe should be a high leverage guy. With no Yasmani Grandal, that's more opportunity for Henry Davis. And on top of those seller moves, Chris, I do think they could add as well. It's just they're not going to be adding rentals. It would make no sense for this team to go and get one guy like a Tommy Pham specifically, or, you know, just another rental player, which is they're a free agent at the end of the year, because the way things are shaping out to be, this isn't going to be a team this year that's going to make a playoff push. But if you can go get a guy with multiple years of control, that's different. And that's where clearing that cap might actually help a little bit, or not cap, but capital, I should say. Clearing out Chapman's salary and Perez and all those guys, even Rowdy, will allow you to maybe make an aggressive move and bring in a guy who has a decent sized salary and multiple years of control. Because it's like, all right, well, we're basically replacing that money with this money, and we're getting a guy who's going to be here for a couple of years. So they could still add. It's just going to be someone with multiple years of control who they think will make their team better moving forward. So I think that's where they are. I think we might see them add and subtract, which isn't, I think, a terrible strategy considering where this team is, that you start building toward making your team the best it can be in 2025. And teams have taken this approach in the past, and sometimes letting the kids play works out. I mean, they let the kids play last year after the deadline, and they played probably their best ball of the season in August and September. So maybe we see that again. And if that translates, then maybe they get back in the mix.
Something you and I have talked about both on and off camera is that the real window for this nucleus that they have together right now is the next 3-4 years.
Yep.
This year was always seen as maybe the final setup year to get into that. And I think that this kind of a situation in the trade market where they could get rid of the guys that were here for the short term and maybe add pieces for the long term that can help in that window. I think all that adds up to this is still along the course of what was expected for this season, what was going on, even with the high moments and the exciting moments. This whole year is about setting up, next in the next few seasons when you have schemes under control, when you have Jared Jones under control, when you have Keller, when you got Cruz, when you got Reynolds, you got this core. Now, can you add the right pieces around them? I wanted to ask you, you mentioned sending away Tellez. What kind of control do they have under him? Because that's a guy who, like you said, he's picked up, and if he could play, if he played as consistently as he has the past month or so, I think that would be like, whoa, like, okay, that's a piece that you do want to keep around, because he was a guy we were talking about. What are they even doing with him? Back in May. So is he a guy that you think could be part of the puzzle, or is he just a guy that's probably going to be gone next year?
I mean, he's on a 1-year deal, but I will say that, I think Rowdy would resign here. Just based off, I think he likes it here. I think he likes the clubhouse, and I think the fans have really come around for him. I mean, you hear them chanting his name.
They're chanting Rowdy.
Right, yeah. They were what's that one coach at? Boo City beforehand. So, yeah, not that we have anything familiar with that. But anyway.
No, we have no personal experiences.
None at all. Anyway, yeah. To answer your question, yes, Rowdy is a guy that he's on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
But I could see him coming back if they wanted him back. But I look at that position as, yeah, if that's who they want to make, they need to make a commitment at that position in the future. You can't just have a revolving door of first baseman every year.
Right.
It can't just be Vogelbach, Santana, Yoshi, Rowdy. You got to get some continuity there. And there's nothing there in the minor league system that suggests that you have someone coming up. So whatever you do, it could be acquiring a player with multiple years on his contract to play there, or sign Rowdy to a multi-year deal, do something. But I think that that's one of the final pieces that they do need to acquire is continuity at first base. Because if you look, a lot of really good teams, they have that position locked down. That's a position that you want. First base is typically one of the leaders of your team. It's a middle of the order type bat. And that's what they're missing right now, a guy who can consistently hit in the middle of the order and provide power. And if they view Rowdy to be that guy, then they should sign him to a multi-year deal. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying if that's how they view him. Right. Or if they don't, they need to go out and acquire someone who can do that. There are some pretty good first basemen on the free agent market this upcoming season. Pete Alonso, Christian Walker, just to name a couple of them, Anthony Rizzo. There's just a lot of names to choose from. You need to, that should be their Russell Martin type move moving forward, where the Pirates, right before that playoff window kind of took off, they signed an established veteran at a position of need to a multi-year deal, not a 1-year deal where he's coming in and saying, hey, I'll be here for a season. Probably will get done at the deadline if I'm not doing good, but an established vet who's done this elsewhere and can say, this is how we do it. I'm going to invest in this culture. I'm going to be here for a couple years. Let's ride.
Absolutely. He's Noah Hiles covering the Pittsburgh Pirates for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Noah, thanks so much. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks to Adam Bittner for joining us as well. We're back Wednesday with more here on the North Shore Drive podcast covering all things Pittsburgh sports. We'll see you here on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.